What's going on, guys? Welcome to Breaking Tackles, the New York Giants podcast. Today with me, I got a special guest. We're going to go over the Tennessee Titans. And joining me today, he is the director of published content for Broadway Sports Media and the host of the Hot Read podcast, which covers the Tennessee Titans, Easton Freeze. Easton, how are you today, brother?
I'm doing great, man. How are you?
Doing good, man. Finally happy that football season is finally around the corner, man. We got finally the first game tomorrow, and it's been a long off season for us. So I'm just excited to see football, man.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So just real quick, let's get off started with the Tennessee Titans. What in realistic are the expectations for the Titans? Is this a team that, as built right now, are they contending for Super Bowl, or that's not exactly the plans right now for the Titans?
Well, I think in the NFL, a reasonable expectation is that if you can win your division,
Mm-hmm.
you have as good a chance as anybody else in the playoffs to make a run and get hot at the right time and contend for a Super Bowl. Now, are they among the very top tier of Super Bowl contenders in the league right now? No, that's not the case.
Right.
But they are certainly still in a position to win their division, and so thus I think they're in a relatively decent position to, if they do wrap the division up for the third straight year,
Mm-hmm.
go in and have as good a chance of anybody to compete in the Super Bowl. Throughout this offseason, I've compared the Titans' situation as stated, as constituted rather, as kind of a competitive rebuild. They made some moves this offseason
like
that kind of telegraphed to us that they see their not window closing,
Okay.
but kind of shifting in a sense that their old guard is either kind of reaching their ceiling or starting to age out, and so they have to not they can't continue to chase the ghost of 2019.
Mm-hmm.
They have to continue to evolve, and in an AFC that is incredibly competitive, obviously,
Yeah. Oh yeah.
they're kind of realizing that they don't necessarily need to keep up with the arms race at the very top. They just need to focus on, building this team out for the future, making sure they don't pigeonhole themselves and put the blinders on in a single season, keeping them from being competitive in the future. And as long as they can continue to compete for and win their division, they're in as good a shape as anybody.
No, that's absolutely true, and that's an amazing way of just thinking about it. You know, they're doing just enough to, at the end of the day, just get to the dance. And once you're in the playoffs, it's anybody's game, and a lot of things could go your way once you're in the playoffs. And I also like the statement that you made, like, hey, listen, we're not gonna put all of our chips in one basket, because what happens then you get what you have is teams like the New York Giants, where you have, maybe a Super Bowl win, but then you have 10 years of complete disgust. Like, so that's actually
Sure.
pretty interesting. And that's a perspective that, I guess we're right now, as the Giants, are chasing now. Let's talk in terms of week one, which you guys are facing us, the Giants. And it's pretty much on paper, this shouldn't even be a close of a game. Just tell me a little bit about the Tennessee Titans, because we really, and most of the fans of the Giants, haven't really seen Tennessee football, Titans football. So more or less, their bread and butter, from a bird's point of view, is Derrick Henry running the ball and stuff like that. But last year they didn't have Henry. Henry's back this year. Is that mostly going to be kind of the main focal point on the offense? Is it just going to be Derrick Henry, or is there anything else you're expecting this season?
Well, it's not going to just be Derrick Henry, but this is still Derrick Henry's team,
Mm-hmm.
and this coaching staff knows that their game. It's not a necessity that they play this way, but it is the way that they prefer to
Got it.
play football. Mike Vrabel likes to just be bigger than you
Mm-hmm.
and dominate in the trenches and collect on some big play opportunities in the passing game, and so that's kind of Titans hard-nosed football, very New England-esque in that way, old
Mm-hmm.
school football. That's kind of the way that the arms race in the AFC South has been working the last couple of years, with the Colts and the Titans both playing a relatively similar style of football in that way. But that's not to say that the passing game is non-existent, and they have a mostly new group of pass catchers this
Mm-hmm.
year that
Mm-hmm.
we're really intrigued to see just how things work out in that department. It's the general notion, the public perception seems to be that the Titans passing game is going to take a significant hit, having lost their star talent in A.J. Brown to the Eagles.
Correct.
And it's certainly the case that their ceiling is lower without A.J. Brown. They've not replaced him with anybody on that same level, to be sure.
Right, right. Because
However,
we don't know
it's
about
also
Traylon Burks yet.
absolutely, absolutely. And is it the case that Traylon Burks could end up being as good as A.J. Brown? Sure, but it's not going to happen this first season. Obviously,
Right.
he's going to need to develop, just like A.J. Brown. It was significantly better in his third season than his first, and so.
But have you guys had a weapon like So Robert Woods is coming from the Rams to you guys. He's the one that could, blow the top off of any defense. Have you guys had a weapon like that in maybe last year and the years before, or is Robert Woods something new to the table?
Well, I mean, A.J. Brown was that guy, right?
Okay.
I mean, A.J. Brown at this point in his career is a better receiver than Robert Woods is.
Right, for sure.
Robert Woods, they play a relatively similar style of football in the sense that they're both great blockers. Mm-hmm. They have sneaky speed, but really their bread and butter is crossing routes over the middle and short to intermediate passes where they get the ball and then they collect on yards after the catch.
Possession receivers, correct. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so this receiving group, while the ceiling is not as high as it was with A.J. Brown, it's also the case that last year the receiving core in Tennessee was essentially A.J. Brown and then nobody. Julio Jones couldn't stay healthy for more than 10 seconds at a time, and their depth was significantly lacking. Now, they still have an issue with lack of depth at the receiver position, but they have more viable mouths to feed.
Yeah.
They have multiple tight ends on this team that are good pass catchers. Something that they couldn't say last season. They had no decent pass catchers at the tight end position. And they have 3 wide receivers who can reasonably be expected, arguably 4, depending on what you think of Nick Westbrook-Akine, who can be depended on to be reliable, above average weapons in the passing game. And so I think that's going to help a guy like Ryan Tannehill to have more options on the field. Obviously, none of them as talented as A.J. Brown, but the trade-off being A.J. Brown or nobody versus a handful of guys that are less talented, but you can trust them, right?
No, absolutely. So in your opinion, you guys were ranked last year 14th in terms of points per game on offense. And do you see that because now there's, I don't want to say necessarily a better weapon than him, like you were saying, but there's just more variety now. And on top of that, you're hopefully getting Henry back for more than just 8 games. Is the offense looking to take a step up this year from last year? Is that safe to say?
I think that it will, just in the sense that for the majority of last year, the offense was rather abysmal, especially in the back half, and that was less to do with just having lost Henry and more to do with the fact that they broke the NFL record for the number of active players on a roster in a single season with 93 different players. The injury was tremendous in Tennessee all year long, and so yeah, it was remarkable that they managed to do what they did. Despite that.
Yeah, because I'm just about to say right now, you guys scored 24 points a game. And I'm sorry, because it's coming from the Giants where we're getting like 19 points a game. It's pathetic. But 24 points a game, I would slap my mom for 24 points a game. So it's so crazy that you're telling me this. It's fun to see that the Titans, might even get crazier this year with the points.
Yeah, absolutely. And to be fair, a number of those, that average was certainly bolstered by a handful of games against Jacksonville and Houston and the like. And so, it's nice to be able to pad your stats with a couple of 30 or 40-point games a year.
Okay.
Now to be fair, again, I'm not sure that's going to be the case this year. I'm higher on Jacksonville than most.
I am too, because of their head coach. He's coming in with that RPO offense that he could score points on people. That's for sure. Yeah.
Exactly. So I think that the AFC South is going to be a more competitive bunch than folks think, because the perception seems to be right now that it's the Colts division to lose, and then a collection of the most boring and or bad teams in the league, which is just the way that it works when you're in. The AFC South is the polar opposite of the NFC East, right? It is the smallest. It's the smallest market. division versus the largest market division collectively, and so that's just the nature of it.
That's so interesting. Let's now shift now to your defense. Now your defense was the pride and joy of the Titans. You guys were ranked, I believe it was 6 in points allowed at last year. Tell me a little bit about the defense, and especially your front four. Clearly, you guys had a unlucky break just before the season starts. You guys lose one of your second All-Pro defensive lineman, and just overall, is this defense gonna remain still as a top 10 defense, or is this defense might take a step back, especially because of the injury?
No, I fully expect this defense to be just as good, or if not better, than they were last year. Here's the thing: losing Harold Landry, there's no sugarcoating it that he was the the most effective pass rusher on the Titans front four.
Correct.
However, it's also the case that last season the Titans front four at best was really a front 3.5 because their outside linebacker Bud Dupree, coming off of his ACL in the season previous, he really was not back into decent form until the last couple games of the year.
Right.
And it wasn't like the defense didn't get good until the last couple games of the year. It got better as the year went on. And so they're essentially going to be going from a year where they had 3 fantastic players on the front four with Bud Dupree being absent to a year where they're going to have 3 fantastic defensive players on the front four with Harold Landry being absent. So I'm not positive it's going to be nearly as big a loss as people think. Now, obviously, Bud Dupree did play some, and Landry won't obviously be doing that. And so it's going to be big on the guys coming up behind Landry. But the other silver lining in that regard is every team has at least one player who everybody recognizes as good enough to see the field, but because of the players they're behind on the depth chart, they just kind of get the short end of the stick and don't play nearly as much.
Makes sense.
Well, the guy behind Harold Landry, Rashad Weaver, was that guy on the Titans roster. He was certainly the best backup, I think, across the entire roster that the Titans had. And so, he's relatively unproven in his second year, not having played last year much. But what he's shown, his ability in the preseason and in camp and everything, he certainly has the upside to be, again, not Harold Landry.
Right.
He's not going to be at that level, but be an average to above average outside linebacker in the league. That certainly is within the realm of possibility.
So it's so you guys are still pretty much so what you're telling me is you guys are still a really good front 7 at least. What about the backfield and the secondary for this team? Is that still the weakness of the Titans, or did you guys made any acquisitions, stuff like that, to kind of tighten that secondary?
Well, really, it's the cornerback group that was the perceived weakness last season. The safety duo,
it's one of the best 2 in the league. Correct, yeah.
I would argue that it is the best 2 in the league.
Right.
And with Amani Hooker and Kevin Byard back there, they did a decent amount of babysitting last season with some of the cornerback situations the Titans had. Part of that was just because of the personnel they had, and part of that was due to the personnel they didn't have because they were out with injury. Again, that was a group that got hammered hard last year, and so there was some really, really deep depth pieces having to play corner last season, and they kind of got their butts covered by the second or the front four, rather, forcing the quarterback into an earlier decision than he would like. But the quarterback group, on paper at least, has gotten better because it's the same group, healthy this time.
Got it.
And they lost their cornerback 2, Jackrabbit Jenkins, but replaced him with 2 young, incredibly promising starting caliber cornerbacks in Caleb Farley, who in his second year, first round pick 2 drafts ago, coming off of an ACL injury, but he's his upside is tremendous, and he's one of the freakiest physical athletes that I've seen in Titans camp. He's just the longest guy ever, which makes him a really dangerous weapon as a cornerback. And then Roger McCreary, who's a rookie coming out of the SEC, and the knock on him was the fact that he has really short arms for an outside corner in the NFL. But he was, he put up one of the greatest cornerback seasons in SEC history last year as a junior at Auburn. And so he's a guy that, as of now, it looks like is actually going to be starting over Farley as a rookie on the outside. And he's had one of the best camps of any Titan this preseason. So it's a group that is incredibly young, the elder statesman in the room is a third-year player, and so the experience is lacking in that regard. But the youth and the upside of talent is tremendous. So they're, in terms of known quantity, they're the biggest question mark on the defense. But they could, on just in terms of if everything goes right and everybody's upside is realized,
They
they
should be
could
even
end up being
better.
a strength of this team. Yeah.
Yeah, that's insane. Now I'm gonna ask you two more questions before I get you out of here, Easton. One question is this: I saw that the Titans as a blitzing group, and this is obviously in part because you told me the secondary had a babysit, especially the safeties. They were the bottom of the league in terms of blitzing, yet they were one of the best teams when it comes to pressure. Is that what we're expecting also this season, where it's pretty much just, hey, let the front four take care of the pressures and just, we will have a maximum people dropping back? And is that how the Titans normally try to run, or do they try to blitz more and it just couldn't last year?
If you'd asked me this a week ago, I probably would have, not probably, I would have told you that yes, that's what I expect to see again. However, a good deal of the reason why they were able to pull that off last
Mm-hmm.
year is because the Titans are arguably the NFL leading team in terms of simulated pressure. It's something that they have kind
That's
of
amazing.
it's something that they've kind of pioneered, and a lot of defensive coaches have gone on the record this offseason talking about how they've been studying the Titans simulated pressures, and that's something that has allowed them to, by sending some of the guys in the secondary up in the slot or blitzing the safeties and dropping some of their front four into coverage,
Mm-hmm.
like Harold Landry did a lot of last year.
Mm-hmm.
It
Mm-hmm.
allowed them to get pressure despite not actually sending too many bodies,
Right.
not sending extra bodies,
So
and so
sending forward, but
that's
you don't know where they're coming from.
correct,
Mm-hmm.
correct, and that's the entire 101 on simulated pressure. Now,
Mm-hmm. Oh,
that's
okay.
something that they relied heavily on Harold Landry to be able to do, because in order to pull off simulated pressures on a
You
regular
need that
basis, you
athlete
have
on
to
the
have
line.
guys on the front
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
who are capable of dropping into coverage and playing linebacker in a coverage role. And so, that's easier said than done, finding guys that can do that. Landry was able to do that. Bud Dupree can do it, but not as good as Landry.
Mm-hmm.
And so losing Landry probably is going to mean they do a little bit more in terms of vanilla blitzes and less on the simulated pressure front, because that is kind of a 201 or 301 level class for a couple of guys that are going to come in for Harold Landry and try to take over. That's a little bit advanced. And so I'd imagine they kind of stick to the basics, at least at the beginning, in terms of blitzing the quarterback.
Yeah, absolutely. And Easton, the last thing that I'm gonna say is, man, regarding this week one, is there any concern to you that the starters didn't really play as much to going on week one, or you like, hey, man, it's the Giants at the end of the day. Even if we didn't practice, even if we didn't play preseason, we should be able to handle the Giants. Is that kind of like the mentality that the Titans are pretty much taking?
Well, it's certainly less to do with the fact that it's the Giants, because
Mm-hmm.
if you know anything about Titans football, you know that it is they're maybe
They
the
play up to
the
the teams that
worst
they're
about
playing against.
correct. They're maybe the worst
Yes,
about that
I
in the
noticed
entire
that.
NFL. They tend to only lose games in which they're supposed to win,
Yep, yep.
and they win games that they're supposed to lose. And that's the double-edged sword that Titans fans deal with.
Yeah,
It's fantastic when they get to prove everybody in the media wrong by beating all these teams they shouldn't beat, but
right.
then they get pie in the face every time that they lose to a team that they absolutely have no business losing to, like
New York
your New York
Giants.
City brethren, the
Oh, the
Jets,
Jets
last
last
year.
year. Yeah, yeah, I
And
saw
so
that.
it's certainly not beneath this Titans team to mess around and lose to the Giants. So I don't think that is something that they're going to be overlooking.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know that that's something that they won't be overlooking. They know. I mean, but Dupree said as much today in his press conference, talking about how
Mm-hmm.
the Giants have a couple of guys in Saquon Barkley and Daniel Jones who absolutely have something to prove this
Yeah.
season.
Oh yeah.
And he said
Absolutely.
we're focused on making sure that we're not the team that they've proven on. And
That's good.
so yeah, and that's a real possibility with this Titans team. So it's been less about that, having the starters not play, and more about the fact that a lot of the starters on this team are proven guys, are veteran guys, the kind of guys that you don't really want to see in the preseason. And this team, is kind of an all old or all young team at the moment. they've got a lot of young, promising guys. They want to get reps, the Traylon Brooks of the world and all of the cornerbacks and a handful of other skill guys on the offensive side of the ball, a handful of guys on the offensive line. These guys, they wanted to get in there. They needed to get them reps to try to sort out who belongs where, who belongs on the team, who belongs potentially as a starter,
Right.
and otherwise just to give them experience because they know that there's a decent chance they're going to have to lean on them down the stretch as some of these older guys get banged up. And so that's really the philosophy behind them not having so many starters in the preseason.
Nah, that makes absolute sense. And Easton, I know you're up on time, so I'm definitely gonna let you go now, man. But before I let you go, just let people know where they can find you and where they can see more of your content, bro.
Absolutely. I am the director of published content at BroadwaySportsMedia.com here in Nashville, covering all things Nashville sports. I am our senior NFL contributor covering the Titans and the NFL, and so you can check me out there at BroadwaySportsMedia.com, at Easton Freeze on Twitter. If you want your friendly neighborhood Tennessee contact, you can hit up there. And I'm also the host of the Hot Read podcast, wherever you get your good podcasts. And so you can check me out there as well.
Definitely, man. And I just want to give everybody a heads up, man. I literally hit Easton up maybe about 3 days ago or less than that. And he absolutely, it's just random strangers hitting up to be on a random podcast. And he was gracious enough to give me a couple of minutes. So I appreciate your time, man. And hopefully you guys are covering a fun season with the Titans this year.
Absolutely. I appreciate it.
All right, man. Take care. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye.
All right, guys, so that was Easton Freeze from the Hot Read podcast. I want to give him a shout out real quick. That was pretty awesome what he did, just coming into the podcast and just talking a little bit Titans football, getting us familiar with the Titans, especially since week one, it's a little bit harder for anyone pretty much to just go ahead and get a little preview of the teams that they're going to face because either the teams didn't play their starters during the preseason, or it could be just a new coaching staff and they're not doing anything. Like, honestly speaking, the Tennessee Titans obviously have a way better personnel than us and a way better team, but there is the unknown factor of what are the Giants going to do. Yes, sure, they can know exactly what Wink does because Wink coming from Baltimore, and they can have kind of sort of an idea because of the playbook from the Bills and the playbook that maybe the Kansas City Chiefs did, but it's still a hard task to ask. It's, hey, what exactly these guys gonna do? They didn't really show their hand. You know, as maybe personnel groupings, you know that the Giants are probably gonna be running on that 11 personnel a lot. You gotta have the corners to match up with them. You gotta be on the nickel or in the dime against the Giants, because if not, it's gonna be maybe a long day for you. Real quick, just want to talk about, before we wrap up this podcast, is the keys to victory for the New York Giants in order for them to win this week. And we'll start off with our offensive side of the ball for the New York Giants. The New York Giants obviously have to rely on quick passes in open spaces because, as we heard, the Tennessee Titans, what Easton told us is that last year they didn't need to go ahead and send blitz. They were, again, one of the lowest teams when it comes to the blitzes. However, they would send 4, and it just wouldn't be the 4 that you see necessarily that dropped off that are in the front 4. It's not necessarily that. They could have guys coming from all different places, and they're still only going to have 4 blitzing you. It might not be the same thing this year because the Titans feel like they have a better secondary this year, and they don't have to have, like Easton said, their free safeties, which is, if not the best tandem in the league or one of the best tandems in the league, they don't have to have them babysitting. So what we have to do is get involved, Saquon Barkley, in the passing game. It's going to be really hard unless our offensive line, which showed us that they were actually running the ball pretty well, again, but that was against second and third stringers. We don't know much about this offensive line. If the offensive line could get some push, then that would be different. But don't expect there to be a good run game against the Tennessee Titans. Expect us to maybe try to pass it, try to get quick passes off. That's the offense. In terms of numbers, we got to get 2 touchdowns, at least from Daniel Jones throwing. Maybe we'll get 1 rushing. This looks like it's a possible game where we're going to need more than 24 points just because that Tennessee Titans offense is going to be running, and it's going to be a lot better. So on offense, we really need at least 24 points just to even be in contention in the fourth quarter. That might not even guarantee us a game, but just to make it sure that we might be even competitive, we need 24 points. We need Daniel Jones to get at least 2 touchdowns on the air, and maybe Saquon rushing for 1 touchdown, and then maybe 2 field goals to win that game. Maybe a 27-24 type of win. On defense, it's pretty simple, man. Stop Derrick Henry obviously has to be the number one priority. And to stop Henry, you need Dexter Lawrence and you need Leonard Williams to just consume the guards and centers of the Tennessee Titans. Is that possible? We don't know. But, all expectations is that Dexter Lawrence is going to be the new nose tackle. And if we could maybe, again, we don't know if Azeez is going to play. We don't know if Tibbs is going to play. My guess is they're probably not going to play. And if they don't play, that's a big blow for us. Again, this isn't a game that it's going to be easy for the Giants to compete in. And honestly, if the Giants do pull off this win, it's going to be a very big upset. However, like Easton explained, the Tennessee Titans do end up kind of playing toward the level of their competition, and they lost to the Jets last year, and they lost to Houston last year. So there is a chance it's any given Sunday at the end of the day, but we're going to need a big effort from the front seven. We need Tate Crowder to just step up his game a little bit more, but we need, most important, the X factors on defense. It's going to be Leonard Williams and Dexter Lawrence. Those two guys dictate the defensive line. They establish a new offensive line by pushing the offensive line for the Titans back and not giving Derrick Henry the ability to just go north and south, but then Derrick Henry would have to go east and west and trying to do these stretch runs. That would be big. So that's one thing. And in terms of the pass, hey, listen, the Tennessee Titans, in terms of their passing game, right now, they're better off this year than last year, just for the simple fact that last year, like Easton was saying, it was just A.J. Brown and the rest of them. I can't even tell you who the rest of them were. Now they have actually weapons. They got Burks, they got Woods, and that's just something that they're going to rely on more, and they're going to have the diversity that they don't have to go just to one guy. It's not double or triple team one guy. They're gonna have Nick Westbrook, Ikinye, butchered his name. But they're gonna have Burks and they're gonna have Woods, and they're gonna have Derrick Henry. Hopefully, would it be for more than 8 games? So, is they were ranked 15th last year? My guess is they're probably gonna be a little bit better than that. But is the continuity there right now? You don't know. This is the perfect week for the Giants to get the Tennessee Titans. By the way, the Tennessee Titans is a super even team in terms of pass to run ratio. If we get them out of that 50-50 range, if we make him pretty much one-dimensional, Tannehill is going to run into mistakes. Tannehill will get sacked. Tannehill will stay in the pocket. Tannehill doesn't really buy time with his feet too much. He stays there, which is good and bad. Stays in the pocket. And, we could maybe get some pressure on him. We can maybe force some bad throws. Or we could get some sacks on Tannehill coming up this Sunday. Well, that's all I got for us this week, guys. The realist in me says the Giants lose week 1. I think it's going to be a close game, but I do think that we might take the loss in it. But the fan in me is saying that we somehow, some way get an upset and upset the Tennessee Titans. Let's see. Let's hope. And at the end of the day, the game is played on the field and not on paper. So we'll see how that goes. But for Breaking Tackles, I'm Antonio, man. And thank you so much, man, for you guys joining this quick episode. We will be doing previews with hopefully different content creators from different teams. And we'll cover the different teams and and it's going to be a lot better after week 1. Week 1 is always the hardest when it comes to covering opponent matchups because we don't have no film on them. We will have film on the Panthers, and we will see the Panthers. The Panthers game is actually going to be at 1 o'clock before the Giants game. If you have NFL Game Pass, or if you even if it's red zone, you'll see all the scores for those games. I absolutely encourage all fans to watch the Panthers game. That's going to be the game that I'm going to be looking at for sure on Sunday, among other games, obviously because of fantasy football and stuff like that and gambling. But yeah, guys, my co-host hopefully probably be here for the next time we covering a team. For Manny, for Sal, I'm Antonio, man, and guys, like, subscribe. I appreciate you guys coming through, and yeah, man, have a great one. Peace.